I am perfectly happy being by myself. I'm comfortable with myself days on end without a lot of human interaction. I think that's a good quality, but it can be a bad quality too. Now, it's not that I don't love people. I do. I love interacting with Nicole and clients, but it definitely drains me. I always have to go find my safe spot, my time alone. When I was younger, I thought being an introvert meant that you didn't want to be around people, and being an extrovert meant you were the life of the party. And I've learned that it's actually not that way. An introvert enjoys people, can be extremely sociable. It's just that they get their energy and they recharge by being alone. And that's what I am. I love being around people, but I have to have my alone time to recharge. Whereas an extrovert, they recharge being around people. And I think that was an important thing that I understood. But one thing I know, that as we get older, it's important that we make sure we have a social network to support us, because being alone in retirement can be really sad. So I got to work on that. Maybe you do too. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. This is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive, but thrive in your retirement. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host, and let's get this show started. So recently I had conversations with two different people in their 70s. Mid-70s, a guy and a gal, separately. The guy lives alone and has a very robust social network. He does these gun competitions where there's this group of people where they go, and it's called 3-gun, I think it is. I've never done it. And he has a coffee club. He has his church. And although he lives alone, he's a widow, never wants to be married again. When I talk to him, he always sounds alive and engaged. Now, the lady, roughly the same age, lives alone, has some children issues, definitely not the most healthy relationships, and she is very lonely. She has, some activities that she does, but she doesn't have a good network of friends to enjoy and do life with. And she's a widow as well. He's a widower. And it's very interesting talking to the two of them and hearing the quality of their life through our conversation. And I've seen this time and time again. The people with the most robust network of friends seem to be the happiest, the healthiest, and the most engaged. Now, when I say network of friends, I'm not talking about this huge network of friends and they got thousands of people that they talk to all the time. It can be a couple special, deep relationships. It doesn't have to be something huge. I don't have a lot of quote-unquote friends. I have a very small group that I would call as friends. So it doesn't have to be something huge. But I think this is important. And if you haven't noticed, the theme for February 2018 has been the relational aspect of it. We're starting to do themes month by month, and we're going to finish this one out. And we're going to talk about the importance of having friends in retirement. And then we're going to have our buddy Nicole on the show to answer some of your questions. But we can't do any of that until we have this all-important disclaimer. All right, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. That is basically, don't take advice from me on the show. I only give advice to clients that I work with. And unless you are one of them, this is helpful hints and education. And before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your financial advisor, or your tax advisor, because that's just common sense. There's more legal language at the end of the show, but for now, let's get on to this friend thing in the Hot Topic segment. So let's face it, as we get older, it's very natural for our friends, our circle of friends to shrink. Our motivation to get out there and be friendly slows down. And as we talked about earlier, I think last week on the marriage end of it, it's a danger because what will happen as you get older, most likely, is your friends will move away or pass away. And if you're married, your spouse may pass away too. I've seen that happen, and the surviving spouse can be left with a very small or non-existent friend network. So this is a thing that we need to at least be aware of and be intentional about to maintain our social circles, because the natural flow is that our social circles get smaller. Our work circle goes away. Our friends move away. We become more in tune with people that we want to be around and people that we don't. And it's very easy just to not, because we're getting older and sometimes we get more sedentary. So remember, retirement changes your circles in so many ways. But on the other end, now is the time, because you're this mature adult, you have a lot of experience in the friend relational arena. So maybe you can actually get better friends, healthier friends that support you in the way that you want to be supported. And the cool thing is that now you're this hopefully fully formed human with wisdom and experience and funny stories and so many mistakes that you get a lot more to offer somebody than maybe you did when you're 19 or 20. So how do you make friends if you are maybe shy? I mean, some of us make friends very easily. As introverted as I am, I make friends pretty easily. I used to not be that way. So for those of you that are maybe shy or just, a little intimidated by the whole thing, how do you actually make friends if you find yourself someplace where you feel, man, I'm sort of lonely? So here are some ideas. Number one is admit that you're lonely. It's okay to admit that you're lonely. Sometimes we don't want to admit that to ourselves. I had to admit that to myself, that I was lonely, and it's sort of like, that's the first step, I guess, in recovery in anything. You got to admit you got a problem. Now, interestingly, in my case, and I'm 51, so I'm not retired, but I am lonely locally, if that makes sense. I feel like I have a good circle of friends. The problem is none of them live here. They live in Franklin, Tennessee. They live in California. They live in Georgia. They live all over the country, which is awesome in its way. But it's not as awesome when I'm sitting saying, I would like to go ride my bike with someone, or who can I go have a beer with? That's when I feel lonely. So I'm working on that with myself. I have a couple friends and I have a couple prospects, but it's okay to be lonely, because that spurs you to action. So once you know you're lonely, how do you start to get out there and make acquaintances? Because it's harder, it feels like, to make friends when you're older. You don't have shared history a lot of times. So how do you make new friends? It is a little weird because we all have our own lives going on. So here are some ideas. Number one is follow your passion, because passion brings people together and gives them a commonality to connect people. So for me, I try to make friends in cycling. I try to make friends in my fitness area. I'm trying right now locally to make friends in my board game geekdom area, because I don't have friends locally to play games with. I have all these games. My wife laughs at me, but I don't play them because I don't have anybody to play them with. Oh, shed a tear. No. I'll find them. But follow your passion, because that will bring you around people that have some common interest. The second one, play in traffic. Get out of the house. This is a big one as we get older, because it's easy just to hang out in the house, work in the backyard, sit at the pool. It's easy to isolate yourself, because that's sort of how we build houses nowadays. It's not common to just be in the front yard and meet your neighbors, right? So get out and play in traffic, whether it's whatever. Next, become a joiner. Join things. Back when I was doing CrossFit, and I joined CrossFit, and what I liked about CrossFit the most, other than the amazing body it created for me, was the social aspect of it. Because the way it works is you are interacting with people, so you can't help but interact, and I made some friends that way. So become a joiner of activities. And there's lots of ways to find activities through Meetup, the website, through even the local paper they throw on your porch for free, websites that show you what's going around. It could be going to the knitting show, going to the gun show, going to something where there are people to interact with that you can talk to about guns or knitting or whatever it is that you want to talk about. Guns is probably a bad topic. But anyway, you get the point. Now, when you go and join something, here's what I've noticed, is you want to stay after a little bit and mingle. Now, I've noticed this in my yoga class that I'll go to yoga, and a lot of people, as soon as they're done, they'll run out the door. Whereas if you stay and you lollygag and putting your mat together, and you can spark conversations. And I've become friends with Carla, the yoga leader. What do they call him? I don't know. Carla and her husband, and they like bourbon. I'm trying to learn to like bourbon. They're wacky. We talk about, I gave them my book. Of course I did, right? But if you stay and mingle, that can help you make an initial connection to someone that might become a friend. Next, just look for acquaintances. There's a lot of pressure in trying to get a friend around, right? There's a lot of pressure in, hey, will you be my friend? We don't want that. But you can, like I would call Carla and I and her husband, we're acquaintances. We're between acquaintances and friends, I would say. But just look for acquaintances of someone that you could go ride a bike with. I have a good buddy, Dan. I call him a good buddy. He and I used to live in the old neighborhood together, and we reconnected actually at yoga. He just happened to be in the yoga class one day, and Dan likes to ride bicycles. So he and I, hey, Dan, how you doing? What are you doing in yoga? How's your body feel? Blah, blah, blah. And then we've gone mountain biking 2 or 3 times. So he is an acquaintance that is in between a friend, but we've enjoyed doing this activity together that was different than yoga. And the only way I met him was joining yoga, mingling a little bit, and then saying, hey, you want to go ride sometime? And we did. So that might be a really good example of just make some acquaintances at first. And then lastly, be the leader. Remember, I forget, was it Lady and the Tramp, the dog? I'm the leader. It's so cute. But anyway, be the leader, because most people won't take the initiative. Most people are craving connection, acquaintances, and friendship, but they can't take the first step. So be the leader, and it takes some courage to put yourself out there. Say hi first. Ask about them always, because people love to talk about themselves. I think if you do these things and focus on building friendships, not just at your age level, but 10, 20 years below you, you can be intentional about building a social network that will support you for decades to come. And I think this will help you thrive in retirement. Now, let's go talk to one of my friends who is so young, Nicole, and let's answer some of our friends, your questions, in the practical planning segment. Well, welcome to the practical planning segment. We got Nicole with us today. How you doing, Nicole?
I'm great, Roger.
Now,
How are you?
I don't know if I told you this. You have so many titles. In addition to being an awesome sidekick, a rock star, a great assistant, I would say that you are probably, you might have made my Fab 5 in Friends.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that makes me so happy. Wow. Or I'm like the super dork of the century. Questionable here.
Yeah, I enjoy our time. I have so much fun working with you. So I just wanted to honor you and tell you that, and thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I consider you an excellent friend and mentor as well.
Mentor, now she had to throw that in there to remind me that I'm so much older. Anyway, we have a couple questions from some friends of the show. So what do we got today?
Well, our first question is from Lana, who writes in, I just finished listening to your podcast episode on pre-tirement. A great topic and not something I had thought about much before. I especially like the dimmer switch analogy. I am passionate about productivity and organization and would love to be a professional organizer in my pre-tirement years. I'm looking forward to hearing other ideas as well.
Very cool.
So I guess it's more of a comment than a question. Sorry about that.
Well, we can answer comments, right? We just put a question mark at the end. Then it's a question.
Right. Just change the punctuation. It's no big deal.
So this is referring to an episode we did on pre-tirement. I don't recall what episode number that was. I think we did that episode in the fall, and it was on pre-tirement. So Real quick, since we don't have the episode, Nicole, can you put that in Six Shot Saturday?
Will do.
Awesome. So let's talk about that real quick. Pre-tirement is that stage between full-time work and what we think of as traditional retirement with no work, right? What our grandparents used to do. Pre-tirement is that stage where you're working, usually doing something you enjoy at a much slower pace, earning less money that gives you time freedom to pursue other interests outside of work. So it's that in-between stage of full-time work and traditional retirement. And the whole idea of the dimmer switch is most of us, when we think about retirement, think about work and then I stop. Like a light switch, right? You turn it off and then you're done. On or off, very binary. Pre-tirement, or the dimmer switch, is planning your life as you slowly dim down full-time work to part-time work and you gain more life freedom. And that's what Lena's talking about. And I've seen it and help people do it successfully. And it really gives you the best of both worlds and definitely helps on the financial end. So I think that's awesome that you want to do something in organization and productivity. It's a huge space. I'm a very big consumer of that with Michael Hyatt stuff, who's a productivity guru. So the question is now, Lena, and for anybody that's thinking about pre-tirement, the time to start noodling on what that could be and how to do it is while you're still working. So the question is, what can you do now to test and refine what that might look like? So if you have a market, like in your case, you could do some research on who exactly it is that you want to serve and what problem they're trying to get solved and what you're going to offer. So a good framework for that, a new book came out by a gentleman called Donald Miller called Story Brand, which is one of the best frameworks for thinking about not what you have to offer, but how to serve people and speak to people on the issues that really are important to them. So that would be a good book to do that. So you could start doing some research on what you might offer and who you might serve. You could begin networking with others in your space locally with, groups like Meetup, and find people that are actually doing what you want to do or are on a similar journey. And so you can start helping each other. Or you can also connect with lots of people online, which I think is a brilliant way to do it because then you have access to the entire world. I got a good example of that, Nicole, that's a little off topic, but it just happened yesterday. So a good friend of mine, Rajiv, and I were going to Mongolia in July. And we were doing all of this planning. And this is like if you were planning for pre-tirement. So I think the framework works the same way. But he reached out. He knew somebody that goes to Mongolia every year. She's a nurse and she travels there to teach CPR and things like that. So because we were on a similar journey of wanting to go there, we found somebody that is farther along in that path of doing it. And we had a call with her yesterday. And I'm actually going to have her on the show because she's amazing. But through that journey, she gave us so much information and connections that is going to totally change what this trip is going to look like. She gave us a lady who lives there with her husband who would love to literally just join our trip and be our impromptu guide and interpreter. She connected us with a gentleman who owned a small aviation company that will fly us all around the country to different provinces, so we don't have to do commercial stuff, and have such a love of country and are going to be that facilitator that is just going to totally change the dynamics of the trip. And that was all through us looking for people that had already walked this journey and connecting with them. And it's amazing how much people share. So in your case, Lena, it could be who is doing it now in a way that you might want to do it. I bet if you emailed them, called them, asked them to coffee, or just started conversing with them, they'll be very generous in what they would share, and it could leapfrog what you're going to do. And then the last thing you could do, right, there's lots more, but the last thing I'm thinking of right now is you can test it while you're still full-time working. So I'm a big believer in, I always call it the old car, new car. So your old car is your full-time job, right? That's the car that gets you around town and, is always reliable. The new car is this pre-tirement idea you have. The time to start testing it is while your old car is still working. At night, on the weekends, you go into the garage and you work on that new hot rod car that you're excited about. just like you might work on what this pre-retirement, and you test it to see the viability of the income it could provide and the lifestyle it might be able to provide. But just like with an old car, new car, if you're working on the hot rod, you still got to keep the old car to get you around town because that new car may never get done, or it may be a much bigger project than you really thought you wanted to sign up for. So I think that's the third thing that is very valuable, is to test it while you still got the reliable income rather than just simply retiring and then figuring it out. Nicole, are you going to retire, or are you going to find some kind of pre-tirement? Well, you hardly work now, obviously, but...
I feel like so much could change before I'm at that stage. I'm just going to wait and see.
Your life is so busy. You're just duct taping here and there. Kids, husband, me, life, craziness.
Basically. Well, if you think about it, a lot of the jobs that exist now didn't 20 years ago, so you never know.
Yeah, that's going to probably get more and more. Exactly. Okay, well, you stay agile then.
That I can do.
All right, so I'm excited for you, Elena, and everybody else that embraces that concept. But what else we got? Let's get some geek in here. We got any geeks?
Well, we have sort of a technical Social Security question from Steve, who wrote in and says that he is considering retiring and collecting Social Security. And he knows that there's an earnings cap between 62 and 66 and a half of roughly $17,000 a year. He wants to know if he decides to work as an independent consultant or start a business, how much can he put into tax-deferred accounts before he hits the cap? In other words, would the retirement fund contributions be deductible from his overall earnings like a business expense?
So he wants to know if he can sort of have his cake and eat it too by earning money, but deferring a bunch of it in retirement accounts and then not having his Social Security benefits reduced because of his earnings. It's a great idea. I bet you the IRS has thought of that. So, Steve, well, first off, big disclaimer. I am not a tax consultant. I don't give tax advice. So you definitely need to work closely with a CPA if you tried to implement anything like this. Here's my understanding of it. So, number one, any decrease in benefits because of earnings, if you take Social Security between 62 and your full retirement age, that money ultimately comes back to you when you reach full retirement. So it's not like it's totally lost. And I may need to back up here. So for those of you that don't know, if you choose to take Social Security at age 62 at a reduced benefit, and you have earnings because you're working, subject to limits, you could have your benefits actually reduced based on the amount of earnings that you have. And I'll send a table in 6 Shot Saturday from the Social Security Administration that's really helpful on this. So that's what he's asking for, because he wants to know if he defers his tax-deferred money, can that help with his benefits not being reduced? Well, what does Social Security consider income for the purposes of this reduction in your benefits during those early years until you reach full retirement? Well, they look at your gross earnings. So your contributions to tax-deferred accounts likely would not help you, because they're going to look at your gross earnings, not your earnings after contributions to IRAs and employee retirement plans. Now, if you're self-employed, what they do look at is they look at your net earnings, but they do count into those net earnings employee contributions to a pension or a retirement plan. So if it's an employee contribution and you're working as an independent contractor, that's probably going to get factored in. Now, I had this question and I was talking it with my good friend Devin Carroll, who has a great retirement podcast as well. He's very versed on Social Security. I was like, well, what if we had like a simplified employee pension? Because a simplified employee pension, or a SEP, technically, if I remember, is employer contributions. So would that help you get to having that cake and eating it too, which I don't know why you wouldn't do both in terms of cake. Would that help you? Because that's technically employer contributions, and he wasn't quite sure either. So if you try to pursue anything like this, I would definitely talk to a CPA and really get this dialed in, because there's a lot of gotchas in the code. And then there are, when Devin and I were talking about this, there are gotchas that the IRS could impose based on how many hours you work, and it can get really technical, far beyond my expertise for sure, but I would be careful with that. Now, what does not count to income when it comes to the reduction of Social Security benefits before full retirement age? Well, if you have a pension, that doesn't count. Investment earnings, interest that you might receive, capital gains annuities, government benefits, all of those things aren't going to count to this earnings that the IRS might look at to reduce your Social Security benefits. This is a really sticky area, Steve. If you want to try to get fancy about it, it really makes sense to have a tax accountant right at your side. That wasn't too geeky. That was okay. But I think this brochure, Nicole, that you can include in Six Shots Saturday, I think it's a real simple one, but actually the Social Security Administration has some really good resources. And this is one of them, so we'll make sure we link to that.
You say that with such surprise in your voice.
I do, don't I? I don't know why.
That happened to my father-in-law. After he retired, he got like a bonus payout. And for whatever reason, like the Social Security Administration thought that counted as him like earning that year, and they cut his Social Security benefits. And now my in-laws are having to go through all these hoops to get like letters from his old employer saying that he wasn't actually an employee at that time.
Yeah, there's lots of things to be careful about. Yeah, for sure. Well, on that wonderful note, Nicole, I think we should probably go get a little happier. Hey, Nicole, welcome to the Happy Lab.
I'm so happy to be here in the Happy Lab.
Well, that's because you're with friends.
On how to get happy.
That's because you're with friends. So this episode was making friends in retirement. And it goes with that episode pretty close with an episode we had a few weeks ago on loneliness. But I think one reason why it's really important to make friends in retirement from a happy perspective is for a lot of us over the years, we've defined who we are by what we do, right? I'm a mom, or I'm a dad if they're stay at home, or I'm a financial advisor, or I'm a product specialist, or whatever it is that we are. And that defines who we are. Well, when we start to shed that in retirement, we're redefining who we are. So making new friends can help in that, because what will end up happening is all the friends that knew you as that's sort of hardwired into them, and creating new friends can help you experiment in figuring out how you define yourself. And I think that's a healthy thing to do. And I've found that when people ask me what I do, I don't focus on what I actually do, and I start to tell them about who I am as a man. And it opens up some pretty interesting conversations. So it makes me happy when I do that. So that's, I think, an important reason to think about making friends, because it's going to help you figure out really who you are in that next phase of life.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off for a 7-day sprint to take a little baby step to creating a great retirement. So this goes along with friends, but it's a little different, because in the next 7 days, what I want you to do is start to noodle on or journal on who you are, not including what your profession is. If someone were to ask, so who are you, or what do you do? How would you answer that if you couldn't talk about your job? Try it. It's harder than you think. So I've been receiving a few emails lately asking if we are accepting clients and if we work with people in Arizona, Idaho, even as far as Burma, believe it or not. And we work with clients all over the country. And the best way to find out if we are right for you is to set up what we call a fit meeting. And you can do that by going to rogerwhitney.com, clicking on Work With Us. And what we do is we set up a meeting where we can have a video chat together. And prior to our meeting, we'll send out a fit kit that will give you some basics of how we work. And you can discuss with us what you're looking for, and we can tell you what we do, and we can both decide whether we're a good fit for each other. It's always best just start with a conversation. So if you're looking for someone to walk this journey with you and you think that we might be a fit, go to rogerwhitney.com and click on Work With Us. Hey, until next week, this is Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man. Be well.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.